Today, we are going to be talking to Tafeni English, who is the director of the Civil Rights Memorial at the Southern Poverty Law Center in Montgomery, Alabama. Tafeni has been with the Southern Poverty Law Center since 1997 in different leadership roles. She is warm and intelligent and very straightforward and just a wealth of really important information about things that maybe we as white people of the white race don't really pay much attention to. I know that I didn't until George Floyd's senseless murder by a white policeman last summer. So here I am taking a very deep dive into what it's like for Black people, all the different elements of what it's like for Black people to live in this very white-centric country of ours. Some people think this is a difficult job that I've taken on, and I can see why they say that, but I think it's harder to pretend that we don't know what's really going on and to keep not noticing so that it can continue. I don't want to be a part of that. And I imagine you're here because you don't either. So let's get right to this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I actually got to meet Tafeni in Montgomery this last summer. And it's a very happy story that we'll start out this podcast with. I really hope you enjoy this. And I want to encourage you to check out the website afterwards for the Southern Poverty Law Center, and also to subscribe to this podcast, because the more visibility it gets, the more white people will be listening in on conversations like this that attempt to be 100% honest and brave, take risks, be real, grow, learn, find out what we don't know, but we need to know. All right. Thank you for being here. It means a lot. I really love sharing this knowledge with you. Bye. Welcome, Tafeni English. This is very special. You and I met in Montgomery, Alabama, when I was out in front with some other friends of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Mm-hmm. And do you want to describe what you saw when you saw us out in front there?
Yeah, so I saw you and a group of friends, I will say friends, outside at the Civil Rights Memorial. And for the audience, the Civil Rights Memorial was designed by Maya Lin, and it is a granite water memorial that is dedicated to martyrs of the civil rights movement, of the modern civil rights movement. And you and your friends were visiting. And when I looked out the window, because I was inside, looked out the window, and you all were embraced, like you were embraced, holding hands. And I don't know, kind of what the content of the conversation was, but it was a very powerful moment that I witnessed. And it was just beautiful to see you all out there at the memorial. And like many people who visit that memorial, I imagine that you all had a conversation about the past and why it was so important for you all to be gathered and embracing one another. It was a multiracial group, I'll say that. And so, yeah, and I wanted to come out and engage with you all because of that.
It made it even more rich and meaningful and memorable. So thank you very much for coming out that day. One of the people that was in that group was someone who grew up in Montgomery. So she was part of we were there for 3 days, and she was part of our education, which is why we came to Montgomery. So it was enriching to the maximum, beyond our wildest hopes of how much we could learn and gain, and really have our eyes open to realities about what's going on and what has gone on in this country. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you are working at the Southern Poverty Law Center, which I had some vague awareness. I'm just amazed at how much vagueness is my awareness in my whole life, basically, of the real problems that go on in this country. But I'm trying to fix that now. And so honored and grateful to meet you. So if you could give us, a big wide angle picture on the Southern Poverty Law Center, and then we'll focus down after that.
Yeah, so a wide angle on Southern Poverty Law Center. We just celebrated 50 years of being in existence, and Southern Poverty Law Center started in the 70s to combat Jim Crow laws in the South. And I'm sure your guest who escorted you during the time here, who grew up in Montgomery, could probably talk a lot about that, not just in Montgomery, but throughout the state of Alabama. And much of the South was experiencing this pushback after the gains of the civil rights movement. And we know that the South was very much dedicated to holding on to white supremacy and also holding on to segregation here in Alabama. So Southern Poverty Law Center was started to combat some of those injustices. And I won't go into some of the earlier cases, but I'll just give some brief examples of that. So one case in particular was the case against the YMCA here in Montgomery, who refused to allow Black people to the YMCA. And Southern Poverty Law Center took on that court case, which a judge said you have to integrate. And their response to that judge's ruling was to actually, fill the swimming pool up with sand so that they wouldn't have to allow integration. And we know that, that was happening throughout the South. And in other forms, we know it was happening in schools. We know that schools in Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Tennessee, they were refusing to integrate. And Alabama also was one of those. And so it started out in that manner. And then they later began to monitor the activity of the Ku Klux Klan. So they started a program which was termed Klan Watch. And in the 90s started a program teaching tolerance to help provide resources to teachers in the classroom. Today, teaching tolerance is now Learning for Justice. Klan Watch is the Intelligence Project. And our legal department has expanded. So the legal department, in addition to other lawsuits, prison lawsuits, they really gained their notoriety because they were suing white supremacist organizations and holding them responsible for the actions of their members. So here in Alabama, it was the United Klans of America. There's a case, and you may have heard of it, but there was a CNN documentary on how one woman won against the Klan here, but that was Mrs. Donald, whose son was abducted by members of the United Klans of America. They murdered him, but it was really the organizing of the community in Mobile that really kept the pressure on local law enforcement and the FBI to investigate Michael Donald's murder as something that was sparked by the Klansmen. And after they had their criminal case, there was a civil suit brought against that organization, and it bankrupted the Ku Klux Klan here.
Yay.
So yeah, so SPLC gained their notoriety for that, but today it has expanded. So our legal practice groups, which I talked a little bit about this, during our pre-call, has expanded. So we have the children's rights, economic justice, immigrant justice, LGBTQ rights, voting rights, and criminal justice reform that are now an expansion of the work that Southern Poverty Law Center does. And of course, programmatically, we now have the Civil Rights Memorial Center, which you were able to visit, the outside only because, of course, the pandemic and COVID has had us closed at the time that you were visiting. Right. But the Civil Rights Memorial Center serves as a place to educate and connect the past to the present, because this fight that we're in, the struggle that we're in, is ongoing.
Yeah.
And so we're connecting the past to the present.
That is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you're talking about it, it's like you're telling facts, but you are a Black woman who grew up in the Deep South. So this has got to be personal work. And I try to put myself into what it's like to be you and doing this work. And I just, where do you get your strength? How do you persevere? How do you
So
do it?
I will say my strength definitely comes from my awareness and appreciation of my ancestors before me, right? I was born and raised in Northern Alabama. I have an amazing family. I've always valued them. And growing up, my parents, who grew up in the Jim Crow era, uh, that it impacted the way that uh they parented us, right? So there was this level of fear, but there was also this overwhelming feeling of hope, because they felt like they had come through it, and that all of the stories that they had heard before of their ancestors, even those who were enslaved, that we were at a moment that things would be different for their children, and they would be different for my children and all of future generations, specifically here in the South. I came to this work, and it was really a coincidence. I will say that. And I don't believe that, anything happens by mistake. I think we all connect for various reasons. And I graduated college, moved to Montgomery, and decided that I wanted to go back to graduate school. And I was working with a group home that my college, which is Troy University,
What was your major?
My undergrad is in marketing.
Okay.
My master's is in counseling and psychology. But I knew 2 years before graduating with my undergraduate degree that I would not be spending my time in corporate America. I have a deep passion for communities, specifically for young people, and I wanted to influence their lives in a different way. I did not know that it would come through Southern Poverty Law Center, but it did. So my best friend was working here, and I got a job here. And literally, the first thing that I did was I organized Teaching Tolerance's library at the time. They were, getting all of these books in, all of these resources that people were reviewing for the magazine. And so I spent about 3 months in Teaching Tolerance, and then moved over to the Intelligence Project. And it was while I was in Teaching Tolerance that I knew about Southern Poverty Law Center, right? I knew who they were. I knew about the memorial, but I did not know the depths of their work. And so once I was inside and learned more about the depths of the work, I decided that I wanted to do this because racism really did impact me growing up as a Black woman in the South. And I also, because I heard things when I was growing up, of course, out of safety, that there was this lack of trust for white people, right? I was also taught that I had to behave a certain way. And oftentimes that was because my parents didn't want us to be seen as less than. You're just as good as they are. So, you grow up in this, and as you're growing up, you don't think anything of it, right? But once you get to a level of awareness, when I was engaging with my other friends and talking about some of the positions of our own parents, what I realized is that if anything was going to change, I had to fight really hard to fight against a narrative that I was just no longer willing to live under, right? And so I didn't, and I'm not naive, because I also had to raise my daughter in a way that she understood that it may not be this overt racism, you are not going to wake up every day and see the Klan in Alabama. Like this is not that South. But what you will experience microaggressions. You will experience unfair treatment in schools. You will be looked over because you are a Black girl. You will be told that you are too loud. You will be told all of these things. And oftentimes, especially with Black girls, we we punish them before they even begin living, right? And so I did not want to have those conversations with my daughter. If I'm really honest, I didn't want to have those same conversations that my parents had with me. I really wanted her to enjoy her childhood, her adolescence, being a young Black woman. And unfortunately, I did have to have those conversations with her. I did have to explain to her, why if she went to a function with one of her white friends and she didn't see many, and why parents treated her differently, or why she couldn't, ride in the car with some of her white friends. Not that they were racist, but once you get to a certain age, there's this divide, and it's almost like it's not okay to be on the playground with people of different races. Still, but that's everywhere. I think, that's everywhere. My daughter's in Boston now, and she talks about how sometimes she can walk into a restaurant and, she may be with a group of her peers and maybe the only Black person, and she gets these awful stares. And it's not an overreaction, because when you know what that stare feels like, it is familiar, right? It's very familiar. And so, this is an issue that affects us all, and I definitely think about something that Brian Stevenson said, the North won the war, but the South won the narrative, right?
God.
Yeah.
I want to ask you that's an incredible thought there that he shares. I love Brian Stevenson. Sometimes I look at Black people here, I'm in California, and I look at them, I don't know why. I'm afraid that whatever I say will be rude, but I'm just going to say it, and you're just going to say, Nini, that hurts, or that's rude, or that's a microaggression. I want you to tell me that, okay? But when I see Black people, I'm fascinated isn't the right word, but I'm so glad to see them. And I'm glad to see them in my spaces that are mostly white. And so I do look at them maybe a little bit longer than I would look at someone else who I wasn't familiar with. And I sometimes get eye contact with those people. And what I have felt is that they felt my appreciation of them. And am I kidding myself?
No, I don't think you are. I don't think you're kidding yourself. I think the more we understand how this work will take all of us, and it takes the ability to genuinely show up, and to have conversations, and to ask the tough questions. And sometimes they may not be tough questions, but it really will take all of us. And in it taking all of us, we shouldn't diminish each other's lived experiences as it relates to race and racism and race relations. It is not an easy conversation. And oftentimes we rely on a particular group to do the heavy lifting, to do the work, right? I'm in the process of preparing to do a series of community stakeholder meetings. And in conversation a couple of weeks ago, someone just kept pointing out how they didn't want Black people to feel like they were carrying the load, right? In these conversations. And I think for everyone, that is really different, right? Because sharing our stories with other people is not necessarily carrying a load. What we want people to understand is that undoing white supremacy is not our burden, right? It shouldn't be,
No.
right?
How could it be even?
Right. But it will take all of us having these conversations,
Right.
getting to a place of moving beyond this notion of tolerance again, but full acceptance and inclusion in all of me. That means my culture, that means my dialect, that means the way I disagree, the way I laugh out loud.
Your volume,
Yes, all of that, all of that.
Yes.
I'm working on my PhD. I just started this PhD program.
Wow.
And it's been very heavy hitting. And we started out the gate about leadership and race. And we had an inflection in our class that is much like, the work that I do every day at Southern Poverty Law Center. When we were open, there was never, ever a day that my staff or myself did not have a conversation or multiple conversations again and again and again, not only about the work that we're doing, but about our own experiences of being in the South, right? It is not all bad, right? I don't think that Alabama is the worst place to live.
I loved it down there, I've got to say.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people have this perception that we're walking on eggshells 24/7, and that's just not our reality.
Right.
And we were having this discussion in class, and so just sharing some of our experiences. It was myself and two other of my Black colleagues who are Black females. One is actually in LA and one is in Arizona. And they said, well, aren't you all angry? And we were talking about like what's happened since 2020. And I was like, no, but I'm tired, like I'm tired.
Right.
But it also opened up a conversation because other colleagues in the class didn't understand why we weren't angry. And it's really important to understand that on any given day, almost every day, you could probably just walk to the cafeteria or go into a retail store or be at a restaurant, and you may face some type of microaggression or some racist innuendo, or you're followed around the store because you walked in sweatpants and a ball cap. And so those conversations are complex. They're complex.
Yeah.
Which is why I really admire what you're doing with your podcast, because you are working to gain a deeper understanding. And I really appreciate your concern when we've talked in the past. Yeah.
Thank you. And I appreciate your time, because what I, just keep realizing is that I don't know what I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the hardest thing to learn, because I don't know what questions to ask even. I don't know, like you could just go on Google and you ask a question, you can get an answer. I don't even know what I don't know. And I know that I'm not alone as a white person,
Absolutely.
So I have heard that several times from other Black people, that you are tired. And I know that tiredness is like in your DNA, probably, that it's a kind of an exhaustion from the impact of the white race on the Black race. And I'm that's slowly getting into me in a way that, some people, I guess, are afraid to think about that or afraid to take that on. But honestly, I just feel like smudge is getting out of my brain and out of my heart too. Because the point that's coming across to me is that if I'm not aware of it, then I'm allowing it. Because I'm walking through it blindly without obstacles that are happening to you with those microaggressions which I never understood before either. And because I just, I was like a lot of other white people and just say, oh, come on, that's just a little thing. But little things add up. We know about the straw that broke the camel's back. And that's very, very real. That should not be discounted.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate your letting this conversation be so personal, because ultimately we are all just computing all of this in a very personal way, and it has to come to that level.
Yeah, I often tell people that I can't do this work without being true to my experiences and to who I am, and even how I respond, to this work every day.
Right.
So it's really important.
Yeah, really important. I want to go back a little bit in the conversation, and this might be very well known to other people, but I know that Teaching Tolerance, the name of it was changed, and I so much like that, because I think words are so important. So what was it changed to?
It was changed to Learning for Justice.
Learning for Justice. Woo! I mean, tolerance is just, doesn't that imply white supremacy again?
Well, I tell you, I think our new director of the Learning for Justice program, she did a video on the why. But for me, she summed it up at the very beginning when she says, because tolerance is such a low bar, right? It's such a low bar. It's such a low bar. But I think too, it equates a lot to, if we look at the way the modern civil rights movement and the work done there was just an extension of the work after abolishing slavery. And again, there's this notion that if I can sit in a room with you, right, then I'm good. But what we're really trying to change is this perception of you feeling that someone is less than, or they're not as worthy, or walking away with these stereotypes and misconceptions about different races and different ethnicities. Right. And so I love the way she puts that it is such a low bar. And I think when we talk about this work of justice, right? This work, when we say, what is the ultimate goal, right? And that at the end of the day is justice. It is for everyone to be treated equally in schools, through our court system, right? With law enforcement, with housing, all of that. When you look at, again, it shouldn't matter, but your zip code matters. It determines the quality of healthcare you receive, the type of education you receive, and it overwhelmingly impacts the resources that you'll have in your classroom. So I love the direction that Learning for Justice is heading. We've done some amazing things over the years. We've produced all of these award-winning kits and videos and curriculum that I know have had impact. But what do we do beyond that? And that's where Learning for Justice is going now. And I'm so excited about the work that's to come. And it's the more personal work that you and I talked about. Like it's the one-on-one. It's happening in small places, and doing the work and seeing that work manifest itself in our communities.
And it's that personal thing. That's one reason I've had to do this podcast, because reading about it or watching, movies or YouTube or whatever, it doesn't quite, it's still two-dimensional, but this, even though we're zooming, it feels more three-dimensional and more really connecting. And that's what I'm hoping will happen for listeners by being silent witnesses, is getting that connectivity that you and I are experiencing right now. That I think, you know, is how we move forward for real. That it changes us inside, so that we can't be as clueless as I can't be as clueless as I was before. And that's my goal.
Yeah.
So in our previous conversation, you kind of pointed me to that Peril, PERIL site on the Southern Poverty Law. And wow, that, you know, I not having my kids are grown up and I don't have grandkids. So I'm no longer a teacher. So I really wasn't too clued into the fact that we have radicalization going on in this country with our youth through online perpetrators of who take advantage of the confusion that's caused by all the crises of pandemic and Black Lives Matter and police brutality and systemic and racism and voter suppression. You know where I'm going with all this. So tell us about this part of your work that's happening at the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Yeah. So just to sum it up, you know, like you said, we realize that radicalization is happening with young people, and typically, or in the past, SPLC has primarily focused on providing resources to law enforcement, to other community groups, but not necessarily parents or caregivers. And so when we look at the online radicalization of young people, right, it is so important that parents, caregivers, and educators, and again, it will take all of us, have the tools and resources so that we can fortify these communities in a way that they can resist white nationalists and resist that intimidation and the organizing. And that comes with having these conversations and accurate information and pushing back against the tools that they're using to radicalize young people, right? And if you read in the report, this notion of white genocide, right? And that's just one example, but pushing back why that, you know, the numbers clearly show, you know, that it's almost impossible for that to happen, right? And so
for that to happen, for what to happen?
For radical, you know, for there not to be any white people on the face of the earth.
White genocide, right?
Genocide, yeah. Okay. And so with Peril, we have to strive to seek some common ground there, right? And one of the things that Eric Ward, who was a fellow with Southern Poverty Law Center, he says this all the time: we don't make peace with our friends, we make peace with our enemies, right? And so we have to strive where we can, and we have to find those values that bring us together, that seek the common good in all of us. And so when we do that, we know that in seeking that common good, that doesn't look like harassment or violence that is meant to circumvent any of our democratic practices here in this country, right? And white nationalists, do they need to be held accountable? Absolutely, they do, right? And our focus, while monitoring white supremacist organizations, our focus is ensuring that we reach the audience that would be susceptible to that. And that means that we have to go out and start educating early. That means that our programs, Learning for Justice and the Intelligence Project, along with Peril, can work together to do this work in a way, right? So can we build curriculum, right, for educators that are much more practical to talk about the radicalization of our youth online, right? What do we do with a program like Mix It Up and moving it beyond encouraging kids to get together at lunchtime, but can we encourage them to get together outside of that, right? And again, it goes back to seeking that common good and common ground with each other. But yeah, Peril, again, I know, again, I just can't say enough about that guide and the partnership with that guide, because I definitely feel like it was a long overdue resource.
Yeah.
Because we can tell you all about these white nationalist groups, but the question is,
Right.
what's next?
Right.
Right?
Right.
What do we do? How do we combat that? And it's so much more than inviting someone from SPLC or ACLU or ADL to talk about it and to give you the information. But what do I do when my son or my daughter or my niece or someone that I'm the caregiver for comes home with a flyer?
Yeah.
Like, can you give me practical prompts to start this conversation? Where do I start? And that's where we want to point people.
Or even before they do, just to preemptively, just yeah.
Absolutely. Before.
Because oh, I love it. I'm all about solutions oriented. I mean, yeah, you have to understand the problems, but give me solutions, give me tools, give me a way to move forward. Yeah. Otherwise, I'm going to forget the lecture.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I just am.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. But that site was, and it's beautiful. It's graphically, I need things to be graphically intelligible. I have a very simple brain in a lot of ways,
So do I. So do I.
So it was just so nicely laid out where you could just see what this topic is, and then you'll learn about this, and it's all logically laid out. So thank you for pointing that out to me.
You're welcome.
That's an important gift to the nation, really.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And again, it's a free guide. It's a free guide.
Right.
Educators, parents, caregivers.
Right.
So
yeah. And it was designed with some university or?
Yes, it was. And I can't remember them off my, I know that it's at Northwestern. But yeah, it was designed with some universities, yes.
That know how to design effective curriculum is the bottom line.
Yes.
So that's really important.
Yeah, they did amazing legwork before as well,
Yes.
So I know they, I'm sure it's academia. So I know there had to be some focus group, there had to be some surveys. So they did a really, really good work with that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So
Center for University Excellence. Yeah.
Which one?
Center for University Excellence.
Okay, fabulous. Where is that located?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. That doesn't even matter. Okay. So what else should we know besides everything more? What's your favorite projects? I mean, you've told us a lot, but
yeah.
And also your daughter must be so proud of you.
Now I will say she's very, very proud of the work that I do here at Southern Poverty Law Center. She grew up here in many ways. When I left for a period of years, she was so excited when I decided to return because she felt like that's where I needed to be. And she's turned into a little activist herself. I remember, just being a worried mom with her being in Boston in the height of the protests, and her calling and consulting about, should I go here? Should I go this? But I have to do something. And I was just very proud that she was out organizing and that she's really, really cognizant of that. She actually just did a review. We were doing a new film for the Civil Rights Memorial Center. And so I've reviewed it a couple of times, and she's in Boston, and the media company that we're working with is about 2 hours from her. So she drove to view the film, and she called me back. I was a little worried about it. I said, I just don't want it to be too much. I think it's kind of heavy hitting, but I need another perspective because I may just have a narrow view of it.
Sure.
And she called me and she was in tears. And she said, Mom, she said, I don't know why you're trying to play it safe, but this is what we need. And she said, I wish I had seen something like this when I was in high school, as opposed to all of the black and white films that I saw about the movement. She said, I can relate to this.
Wow.
I can really process my feelings around George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. She said, she said, it really is moving. So don't change anything. And I was like, wow. I did have to change a few things, but it made me feel really good that someone, my daughter's in her 20s, and she understands that the past is very much connected to the present, and that she's not diminishing or dismissing the activism of the past, but she understands that the baton has really been passed, and it is going to be up to her, as well as those of us who are still here to do that. So apathy is really not an option.
It is not an option.
It is not an option.
What
apathy
is this?
Is not an option.
No, it is not an option.
Yeah.
Unless you're okay with the shitty situation, excuse my French.
No, yeah. Unless you're okay with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you are, that's what's happening when we're being apathetic. Let's be perfectly real about that, because either you're for it or you're against it, and there are no gray areas in this.
Right. There's no in between. That's so true. That's so true. That's so true.
Okay, so what is the name of this film? Because now we all have to see it.
Yeah, so you have to see it when you come visit the Civil Rights Memorial Center, because it is the new film for our orientation theater here.
Oh, it's not online.
No,
okay.
It's here, and it is. I can't wait for people to visit us so that they can get a sneak peek of it.
Okay, well, I'm coming back.
I know. That's why I said. That's why yeah. And I can't wait for people to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, I'm excited.
Yeah.
Is there anything more you want to share with us?
Yeah, I just want to, get back to kind of what my favorite is. I don't know if I can choose a favorite, but definitely
you can choose more than one favorite.
Yeah. So I've worked in Learning for Justice. Well, it was Teaching Tolerance at the time that I worked there twice. Right. I worked in the Intelligence Project, and I will say that, I really love the work that I do at the CRMC.
The what?
And the Civil Rights Memorial Center. I really, really love the work because it does provide an opportunity for me to engage, and in some way, a small way. I love when people come in here without any true knowledge of the movement. But they want to come there, they want to learn more. But I also like to feed. So when they leave here, I know that they're thinking about, what is it that I have to do differently? Yeah. Right. And it doesn't have to be anything grand, just something small. Yeah. What can I do differently? And it goes back to what you said, even if it is becoming more aware, having more conversations.
Or what I found, checking my knee-jerk reactions. Just, oh, wait, no, I don't have to make that conclusion, or I don't have to react to that.
Absolutely.
I can just say that, that's her way of doing it. Or that's, I don't have to come to that conclusion. I'm not thinking of any examples right now, but I have found that just that is helping move the needle for me. And the needle will be moving my whole life. I don't mean to interrupt you, but
No.
I appreciate you saying it doesn't have to be anything big. It can be these little things where we catch ourselves.
Right.
Away from the indoctrination of the sea of, okay.
Yeah. And that influence, it happens on, on almost every angle, right?
Yes.
Everything outside is influencing us and telling us how to interact and engage with each other, and how to do this work, how not to do this work. And so it is an ongoing, everyday journey, and it takes effort. It takes effort, and it will take the effort of all of us.
It takes effort, but it gives rewards. I think
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
important. Because people talk about the sacrifice and the effort, but oh my God, the rewards.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That question was posed earlier this week. It's like, even on the toughest days, when I ask myself the question, is the work worth it? And the work will always be worth it. The work will always, always be worth it.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we reset, and that we have days where, we reflect, reset, and we renew for the next journey ahead of us. And sometimes that's an hour away. Sometimes that's the next day, right?
I had to take 2 months off from the work for a while. After
Mhm.
George Floyd's murder, I did about 6 or 7 months, and then I couldn't do anymore. I had to take I thought I was going to quit. There was 2 months when I couldn't do it. Excuse me for interrupting you, but
No,
thank you
no.
for saying that about the reset.
Mhm.
Go
It's
ahead. I'm sorry.
important. No, and I just want to I want to stay there for just a second to
Yes.
encourage, especially the listening audience, that it's important to do that. And your value and your investment in this work does not mean that you have to wear yourself out,
Right.
right? While you're doing it. And it's okay to step back, and not have to be doing this work all the time.
It's almost a sign that you're doing it right if you have to
Mhm.
reset.
Absolutely.
Because it's,
Absolutely. And then I'll say this, and this will be the last thing that I say about, when it comes to the legal practice group. I think every single thing that they're doing is critical, from economic justice to children rights to LGBTQ rights to voting rights, right? It is all critical because they are challenging the systems that continue to perpetuate white supremacy and oppression of people of color, right? The work of our immigrant justice practice group, they're all doing amazing work where they are challenging these policies, right? That continue to have disparate impacts on communities of color. And so, I love this work. I love all of the work, and all of it is just as equally as important. And I really, really hope that, for for people who would listen to this podcast, to definitely visit the website, check out our resources. And it's just like you said, learn as much as you can learn, and be really cognizant and apply what you learn and share it. Share it with other people. Because again, we have to fortify our communities that are doing the work and put our energy there. Yeah. So.
And know that there are rewards. It's not just some big sacrifice train that you're going to have to go down and down and down. It's just because one thing that's just become profoundly clear to me is how we as white people have to turn off something in ourselves to allow this white supremacy and this divide of human beings just based on skin color. There's something that has to be turned off to allow it. And that's one of those things that I wasn't at all aware of as a good white person.
Yes. Yeah.
And, some people think that, and I did too, reading that book, White Fragility, that I would be guilt tripped and feel horrible. Actually, no, it's quite interesting. It's fascinating. It's factual. It's a really good wake-up call. And I can do with that knowledge what I want to do with it to become more conscious. And I find her book a little bit much easier to take than when I watch her on YouTube. So I really want to encourage people to read that book. Have you read it?
I have read that book.
And do you
Yes,
approve?
I do. I do. And what I want to say is, she has another book, and I just recently got it.
The follow-up?
Yes, nice. What is it? Nice white people, like how progressive. What, I can't remember. It's on my shelf. Nice racism. Nice racism. That's it. Yeah.
Nice racism. Oh God.
Yeah. She actually was on a podcast with the author of Grandma's Hands. How
Resmaa
yeah. Oh,
I know he approved. Go ahead.
Yeah, he approves. I'm going to send you this link of a podcast that the two of them did together. And it was really, really amazing. But Nice Racism, it's on my shelf. And I only learned about that book from their podcast. And I was like, oh, I need to order it. But I just haven't had time to read it yet, because I really want to see, how it evolved. Right. But what I wanted to say about the book, like White Fragility, or the work of Jane Elliott, or, Tim Wise and his work on white privilege, that none of that is to make white people feel guilty or shame, right? But what we need is an ownership, right, of the injustices perpetuated by white supremacy. And it's important that we all put our hands, to the plow and get to work to undo this, right? It again, it's about awareness. It's not to guilt you. Is it nice? No, it's not. Is it heavy? It is. It's very heavy, but it is also necessary. It is so necessary for us to do.
Necessary and rewarding.
Necessary and rewarding.
I really want to emphasize that rewarding part.
Yes, rewarding. And that, in order to get to the reward, there has to be a willingness.
Yeah.
So there has to be a willingness to do this work and face, the challenging parts of it.
Yeah.
The parts that don't feel so good, but just know when you get through it, the reward, there has to be a willingness to do that work.
Yeah. And so thank you to everyone who's listening to this podcast. And that's a good step. Yeah. Right direction. And checking out what the Southern Poverty Law Center does. And thank you, Tafeni.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you so much for circling back. Yeah.
Oh, you weren't getting rid of me that fast. That was a wonderful meeting that will always stay with me. And I hope I get to meet you again someday.
Yeah, I hope so as well. I actually was just talking about the Together is Better Alliance yesterday during my check-in. So I have to follow up with you guys about something. So.
Oh, good. Oh, good. If there's any way that I can help with that. But have you been in touch with Sharon Hatchett?
No, not yet. Not yet.
But you have her name and everything.
Yes,
anything I can do. But she'll just take your call.
I was gonna say she'll take it and run with it probably.
Yep. All right.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll see you soon, I hope.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
To learn more about the wide-ranging work of the Southern Poverty Law Center, check out their website, SPLCenter.org.